What is happening to Apple? Well, if you've been following the news recently, you might be aware that Apple's having a really bad time. Their stocks have dropped considerably, they had the weakest number of iPhone sales in years, and not only that, but lots of investors are selling their Apple stocks. And here's everything you need to know about that. Okay, so if you've been watching my videos for the past few years now, you might have seen a few of them in which I've been calling out Apple on all the stupid things they've done. Because oh boy, there were lots of them. So, all the MacBook Pro issues, the silent updates like the Vega 20 MacBook Pro, which was just 3 months after the previous models came out, the tons of inconsistencies that Apple has in their product lineup. I actually did a separate video just on that, 30 plus Apple inconsistencies. Essentially, Apple went from a company that was focused on simplicity to a company that offers way too much with little to no difference between the products. I mean, back in Steve Jobs' era, we had one iPhone, one iPad, and then in terms of the MacBooks, we had, the MacBook in the middle, then we had the MacBook Air, which was thinner and more portable, and then a MacBook Pro, which was thicker and more powerful than the MacBook. So everything made a lot of sense. But now we still have the MacBook Pro, but then the MacBook is actually thinner than the MacBook Air. Why is that? Only Apple knows. And then we also have a brand new MacBook Air, which was introduced at the end of 2018, but that MacBook Air is also thicker than the 12-inch MacBook. Again, so they haven't really replaced the naming schemes. And then also Apple kept the old MacBook Air, the one from 2015, which hasn't been updated since then, and the one that has a design from 2010, so almost a 9-year-old design. That one, Apple has actually dropped the price by 50 pounds. 50 pounds in 4 years. That's a joke. How are they even still selling that? And yeah, every time Apple released a new product back in Steve Jobs' era, it was considerably better than the previous generation. I mean, take a look at the iPad 2 versus the first iPad, the iPhone 4 versus the iPhone 3GS. Not only that, but the products were not getting more expensive. Instead, in a lot of cases, they were getting more affordable than the previous generation. Whereas now, post-Steve Jobs' era, it's the exact opposite. Apple offers way too many products that they can count. Like, look at the iPads. We have the iPad Mini 4, we still have it for some reason. We have the regular iPad, and then we have the iPad Pros. But then you can buy the previous 10.5-inch iPad Pro, which comes with thicker bezels, and the new 11-inch iPad Pro and the 12.9-inch iPad Pros. There's so many options. Yeah, same applies to the iPhones. Lots of iPhones to choose from, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but then the naming scheme is literally a mess. I mean, really? iPhone XR? iPhone XS Max? Why not just call all of them, iPhones and have the names based on the display size like Apple's currently doing, with the iPad Pros, for example, or the MacBooks. Really not sure why Apple has different naming scheme rules entirely for just the iPhones. Essentially, Apple became lazy and they stopped making any major changes with the iPhones. I mean, yes, the iPhone X was indeed a massive change, but before that we had 4 generations of iPhones, the iPhone 6, the iPhone 6s, the iPhone 7, and the iPhone 8, all of them with the exact same design on the front. No wonder that people got bored of Apple. But what's even worse is that year after year, Apple keeps bumping the prices more and more. So when they launched a new model, instead of, removing the old one entirely like they used to, they keep selling the old one at almost the same price, or in some cases the exact same price as before, and they make the new one more expensive. The iPhone 8 was $50 more than the iPhone 7 for whatever reason. The iPhone X, however, was $350 more than the previous iPhone 7 was. That's a huge price increase. That's a 35% price increase in a year, which is insane. Apple had the excuse that the iPhone X was so innovative that manufacturing the components was really expensive, and that's indeed true, but then, the iPhone 4 was also a huge improvement over the iPhone 3GS in every single way. That Retina display, all of those components were also really difficult to manufacture and really expensive, however, the price was pretty much the same. I mean, Apple should have redesigned the iPhone with the iPhone 7, actually. That was when it was due. So a year before, instead of waiting a year to release the pointless iPhone 8 alongside, the way more expensive iPhone X. And then also Apple was supposed to drop the prices in 2018 when component manufacturing became cheaper for the iPhone X, and they actually haven't. The iPhone X did cost $137 more to make than the iPhone 8 did, but Apple decided to charge $300 more. The iPhone XS, for example, is literally the exact same price as the iPhone X from a year before, while the iPhone XS Max is, you guessed it, even more. Yeah, the iPhone XS Max can now go up to £1,450 in the UK, or $1,850, almost 3 times the cost of an iPhone in 2016. That's when the iPhone 7 came out. Awesome. So, of course, that all of these bad money-hungry decisions have had a huge negative impact on Apple. So, first of all, in 2018, Apple had the lowest number of iPhone sales, new iPhone sales in years. However, they've actually made the most amount of profit so far, just because their prices were higher. And this is actually one of the biggest mistakes that companies, mostly startup companies, actually do. Like, if your product doesn't sell well, you need to improve the product instead of, just charging more to make up for the low number of sales. And with the iPhone XR, investors, analysts, myself included, everyone was expecting it to sell really, really well, which it didn't. And then Apple started promoting the iPhone XR everywhere. They spammed their website with iPhone XR ads everywhere. Even the display panels in the Apple stores, the ones which are normally showcasing tips and tricks for users, they started showcasing iPhone XR ads. Yeah, this simply shows how desperate Apple has become. And as a result of these low sales, Tim Cook actually stated that they would no longer be reporting unit sales for iPhones, iPads, and Macs. Just because, the sales are lower and they don't want to show those, numbers to investors. Now, Apple is actually one of the only big tech companies that does this, reporting their sales figures every quarter. Most companies don't really do this, and Apple has been doing it for the past 10 plus years. But yeah, it seems like they won't be doing this anymore, mostly, like I said, to avoid investors being disappointed in the constantly decreasing number of sales. However, the bad news is that the investors have already been disappointed, and the fact that Apple would be holding the figures secret and many other issues that I mentioned before, plus something like, the Apple HomePod being delayed, not even to mention the AirPower, which was supposed to be released in September 2017. We're in 2019 now, so it's getting close to 2 years and it hasn't been released. So all of those issues, all of this caused Apple's stock to plummet. Apple was actually the first US company to reach $1 trillion valuation in August 2018, which is really impressive. However, by the end of the year in 2018, in just 3 months, because of everything that I mentioned before, they lost over $450 billion, almost half of their value essentially. So yeah, Apple's no longer a $1 trillion company. In fact, Microsoft, Google, as well as Amazon are all way more valuable than Apple is. What's even more interesting, fun fact, is that the amount that Apple lost, so $450 billion, is more than what Facebook is worth entirely. So yeah, as you can see, it's not looking good for Apple. Okay, so what does Apple plan on doing in order to fix all this? Well, something that I was actually very surprised to see, and I'm guessing everyone was, is Samsung announcing at CES 2019 that they would be partnering with Apple and that they would be including iTunes, Apple Music, HomeKit, as well as AirPlay 2.0 functionality in all of their upcoming Samsung smart TVs. So yeah, Samsung would be building Apple TV functionality in their own TVs. And I was really surprised to see that just a day later, Vizio, Sony, as well as LG, they've all announced that they would be doing the exact same thing, apart from the iTunes functionality. That's something exclusive for Samsung TVs. So yeah, in this case, what's the point of getting an Apple TV anyways? Well, the UI is still nicer on the Apple TV. The ecosystem, if you're into using, tvOS apps, which let's be honest, no one really cares about, well, in that case, you can get an Apple TV. But to be honest, Apple seems to be killing the Apple TV. However, by doing this, they're also becoming a much more open company, which honestly, I'm totally for. I mean, Apple probably made this decision shortly after seeing how bad their sales were in 2018. And by focusing on services, Apple can heavily increase their profits because, services are things you subscribe to every single month or every year, rather than things that, you pay for when you buy them at once in full, such as, hardware products are. But yeah, let me know in the comments what you guys think about all this. It's crazy. Obviously, Apple as a company, it won't go bankrupt. Nothing of this is happening. But it's interesting to see how Apple's decisions, all of them, well, they got us to this point. Apple stock basically dropping almost 50%. It's crazy. So yeah, let me know in the comments what you guys think about all this. Just subscribe and notifications. If you're new to the channel, tap the bell icon so that you get notified as soon as a brand new video comes out. And yes, that's been pretty much it. Stay tuned for the next video. Next cool videos coming out this week. Pretty cool. Regarding some of the upcoming Apple products in 2019, especially one that's going to be pretty cool. So yeah, thank you for watching. I'm Daniel, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Enough Tech, signing out. Cheers.